Back in the summer of 1992 in Springfield, Missouri, 3 women vanished from a home without a single peep. They were 47-year-old Sherrill Levitt, cosmetologist and mother, her daughter, 19-year-old Suzie Streeter, who had just graduated from Kickapoo High School with a bright future ahead of her, and finally, 18-year-old Stacy McCall, Suzie's best friend. And they left behind all their belongings, their cars parked in the driveway, so where did they go and who did they go with? There's been plenty of speculation over the years. Strange phone calls and suspects have come and gone, but to this day, what exactly happened to them remains a complete mystery. Hey guys, down in the comments, I want to let you know that I left a single trivia question for you to answer. If you get it correct, then you have a chance to see our new movie, An Angry Boy, which comes out on Friday, June 7th, absolutely free. I'm going to pick 3 winners at random by putting the names in a hat, old school style. And I'll announce it on Friday's Everytown video, so if you get it right, your name goes right into that hat automatically. If you don't know yet, I spent the past couple of years working on this film. We have reviewers really loving it. It's next to impossible to make an indie film, so this was a lot of work, but we're psyched to share it, and we'd love if you checked it out this weekend or whenever you get a chance, really. And if you do watch it, toss up a review on Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb. It'll help us out a lot. We think you'll love it, and you don't have to take my word for it. Look at what my new friend, the movie Ginger, just said about it. If you're on TikTok, go check him out, because he gives some fun and solid reviews on horror movies.
I just got done watching this thriller, and it was insanely good. I am the movie Ginger, and today we're talking about An Angry Boy. Let's get down to the rundown. The movie revolves around Owen, who escaped a sadistic cult as a child, but there's just one problem. The past has come back to haunt him, and he won't outrun it this time. Directed and written by Andrew Fitzgerald, I had the privilege of watching this screener before it releases the video on demand on the 7th, and I have to say I really enjoyed this film. Eric Roberts plays the leader of this cult, and I have to say his insanely calm demeanor just freaks me out in this movie. But what I really want to talk about is Scott Kallenberger, who is a newcomer to acting, and this is his first big motion picture. This dude is a fantastic actor. He played the lead Owen. And Caleb Lowry plays his best friend Ricky in the movie. I'm going to tell you what, everybody needs a friend like Ricky, because this dude right here was ride or f***ing die, and I am here for that kind of friendship. The movie just makes you feel dirty the whole time that you're watching it. It's paced perfectly. The violence is not too over the top. It's nasty when it needs to be, but there's a really good story here. I enjoyed the acting, the dialogue was good, and I really enjoyed the cinematography as well. This is a slow burn thriller that deals with cults, and it does deal with themes of child abuse, so trigger warning for that. I am telling you right now, when this releases on video on demand, you're going to want to watch this movie. This was a solid thriller. You'll be able to watch this when it releases on video on demand on June 7th. I give it a 7.5 out of 10. You need to check this out.
Despite the tragedy, and this story starts on a high note, June 6th of 1992 was the day Suzie and Stacy had received their diplomas along with all their classmates at their graduation ceremony. There was an electricity of excitement in the air and a collective sense of achievement. It was time to celebrate, so the 2 girls attended a few different parties that night. They were last seen at around 2 a.m. by several people leaving their last get-together. It had been a long day, and the celebration would continue in the morning when they planned to head out to a water park with their other friend, Janelle Kirby, and her boyfriend. In fact, they were actually supposed to spend the night at Janelle's and leave from there when they got up, but there were a few other people who were going to be sleeping there as well. Stacy and Suzie just decided it would probably be too crowded, so they went to Suzie's house at 1717 East Delmar Street, where of course Suzie's mom Sherrill was as well. On the morning of June 7th, Janelle and her boyfriend hadn't heard from their friends and were eager to get on those water slides and in the wave pool. They drove over to the single-story ranch home on East Delmar Street and saw Suzie's Oldsmobile Cutlass in the driveway right next to her mom's car, so she figured they were home. As they made their way up to the front steps, the crackle of glass under their feet made them pause. Looking up, the covering on the porch light had been shattered, though the bulb was still intact. They knocked, but there was no answer at the door. When they tried the doorknob, it opened right up. Inside, there was nothing noteworthy in terms of signs of a struggle or crime taking place. Sherrill's little Yorkshire Terrier, Cinnamon, did act a little agitated, but other than that, you would have thought that the three women had just gone out for a walk. While Kirby looked around, her boyfriend kindly swept up the glass from the front porch. All their belongings were still there. The 3 purses, keys, cigarettes, and of course the cars. The phone rang then, and so Janelle picked it up, and on the other end, a man was breathing heavily. And she described it as a strange and disturbing call, laden with sexual innuendos, and so she just hung up. The phone rang again, she picked it up. It was the same man, so she hung up again. Janelle called up Stacy's house to see if maybe their folks had seen them, and she explained the situation to Janice, Stacy's mother, who was already wondering why she hadn't heard from her daughter. She then drove on over to check the house out herself. Once there, Janice saw that Susie's bed had looked slept in, and that her daughter's clothes were neatly folded next to it. So it certainly appeared that they had been in there and gone to bed at some point. So then what happened between approximately 2:30 a.m. when the girls got there and 9 a.m. when Janelle arrived to pick them up to an empty house? Janice called the police and they reported the women missing. Janelle then told Janice about the weird phone calls, which prompted her to check the answering machine, at which point she heard a very strange message, as she put it. The contents of it, as relayed to police, have not been released, and unfortunately, Janice mistakenly erased it, which is bad news because it could have contained the clues they needed to hone in on whoever was involved in this case. And in fact, the entire crime scene itself was corrupted because, innocently enough, no one knew that the home was in fact an actual crime scene until it was too late. Janelle's boyfriend cleaned up all that glass thinking he was being helpful, but that could have had a clue in it. Before police had actually gotten to the house, other friends and concerned neighbors walked all around the home as everyone banded together trying to figure out what was going on. And after that, the silence stretched on. June morphed into July, and that initial excitement that went along with graduation had curdled into a horrifying realization. And Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill were gone. And they weren't just missing anymore. And there had been no calls, no messages, no sightings, or any signs of life. It began to dawn on those waiting for news that the 3 women weren't coming back. Susie's dad, Garland, and Stacy's parents retraced their steps on the night in question, desperate to find any scrap of information. Had they mentioned anything unusual? Maybe a new acquaintance, a late-night job or party? But there was nothing. The police, initially hesitant to treat the disappearance as anything more than a late-night escapade, were jolted into action by the sheer number of missing persons in this case. And 3 women, who would go on to become infamously known as the Springfield Three, seemingly vanishing into thin air was a cause for major concern. And search parties were organized, scouring the wooded areas around town. The local news picked up the story, plastering pictures of the missing women across every available surface. And "Have you seen these women?" the captions blared, a desperate plea for any shred of information. The days blended into weeks, and the initial hope began to dwindle. And those search parties, fueled by adrenaline and determination at first, started to thin. Exhaustion set in, replaced by a gnawing fear that the women might not be found alive. And that media frenzy died down, replaced by a chilling silence that spoke volumes about the grim reality of the entire situation. And Susie's ex-boyfriend, Dustin Rekla, was briefly looked into because a few months before the disappearance, he had broken into a mausoleum and was caught stealing gold fillings from out of a skull. And Suzie was mentioned in his police report, as she might be called in court as a witness, and so that gave him a motive to potentially get rid of her, but try as they might, the police couldn't find any evidence against him or his friends that pointed to them having anything to do with it. By December of that year, a man called into the popular show at the time, America's Most Wanted, with information about the women's vanishing. Now, hotlines like this receive a lot of calls, many of which are useless or provide false information, and so they vet these callers well. This particular one provided prime knowledge of the abductions, at least according to police, but before they could talk to him further, he hung up and they could never reach him again. Well, it took another 5 years eventually, though. It seemed like, at least for a moment, that perhaps the case would be cracked open. As in 1997, a man with a checkered past and ties to Suzie's dad, Robert Cox, came out with a bombshell. And he was in prison at the time in Texas for kidnapping and robbery. He had a rap sheet that was pretty long. And he said that he knew that the 3 women had been murdered and that their bodies would never be found. And he didn't directly say that he had done it, but back in 1992, Cox lived in Springfield and had worked on a job for Suzie's dad, so there was an actual connection here. When asked where he was during the time that the crime took place, he said that on that evening he was at his parents' house, which they confirmed. The following morning, when everyone was over at the house frantically trying to piece together where the women were, he said he was at church with his girlfriend. And the girlfriend also confirmed that this was true, but later she recanted the statement, saying that Cox had told her to say this. And Cox claimed he would disclose what had happened to the Springfield 3 after his mother passed away, though he never did. And so to this day, police are unsure if he was actually involved or was just seeking recognition. Over the years, there's been people coming out of the woodwork trying to lend their opinions and shed light on this case. Several psychics have jumped in, appearing on television to give their thoughts on what they see. In 2007, after a tip came in that the bodies were buried under the foundation of a parking garage at a nearby hospital, a couple of crime journalists used ground-penetrating radar to try and see what they could find. And they claimed there were 3 anomalies, each roughly the same size, that were consistent with what would be a gravesite location. This was brought to the authorities' attention, but the tip had no credibility whatsoever, and they also weren't convinced by the radar that these were graves of any sort. On top of that, this garage hadn't been built until September of 1993, 15 months after the disappearances. Because of this, and the cost associated with tearing the place apart and then to rebuild, well, this has never been fully investigated. Over 3 decades have gone by since Suzie, Stacy, and Sherrill vanished from their home, and at this point, the case is completely cold. All that's left are memories of who these women were from those who loved them. And for the families, the pain of not knowing remains as sharp and agonizing today as it was on the day they last saw their daughters and friend. It really is a relentless torment, as left behind is a swirling vortex of unanswered questions. And did they suffer? Are they possibly out there somewhere, still alive? And the unknown is sometimes worse than a harder truth. Perhaps it would have been easier had 3 bodies been found in the immediate aftermath. Instead, there will always be that small glimmer of hope, a faint spark that refuses to go out. Perhaps someone out there remembers something, though. A detail, no matter how small, that could finally crack the case open. Maybe you saw something unusual back in 1992 in that area. Or maybe a forgotten memory is resurfaced. Even the tiniest piece of information could be the missing puzzle piece that brings closure to the families and the community yearning for answers. So share it if you got them, and talk about this story with your friends and family, and let the names of Suzie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Sherrill Levitt echo in the public consciousness. Because in the face of the unknown, the power of collective memory can be a beacon of hope, a force that refuses to let the Springfield 3 case fade into obscurity. Maybe someday a new clue will emerge, a witness with a forgotten detail, a long-lost piece of evidence gathering dust in a forgotten corner, And until they are confirmed deceased, the Springfield 3 will live on. So there was the strange mystery, the Springfield 3. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon.